Okay, welcome everyone to our 30-minute professional development webinar. Is learning really happening? Tips and tricks to check for understanding. So in these 30 minutes, we're going to briefly discuss practical strategies to assess student comprehension in real time to make sure that students are not just hearing what you're saying, but they truly understand the materials and the resources that you provide in your lesson. So, but before getting started, to make sure that we have a smooth and productive webinar experience for everyone, please make sure to follow these guidelines. Please keep your microphone muted throughout the webinar. This will help maintain an organized and distraction-free environment. If you have any questions, you have the chat box. Drop your questions there and I will make sure that I answer as many as possible. This webinar, as we normally do, is recorded for future reference and for those who cannot attend today's session. And I will be distributing the recorded webinar with a handout that I prepared for this session in the PD2Go newsletter this month, and it's also available on Acorn. Now, what is it that we're going to be doing today? Today, let's go with the agenda. We're going to discuss checking for understanding what that means and the benefits. And then we're going to examine a few ideas. You will see that I brought lots of ideas, but I'm very aware that we only have 30 minutes. So I'm going to propose really simple ideas that won't take you time, that won't be time consuming for you to build checkpoints during your live sessions. And then we are going to be discussing a little bit about other ideas, and I will provide the slides so you take with you all those ideas that I won't be able to discuss today. So let's get started and let's do a warm-up. I want you to use a chat box and talk to me a little bit about your teaching experience and your experience concerning checking for understanding. What are those signs that you see in your students that make you go like, they're not really grasping the concept, or they're not really understanding what I'm talking about? And how do you address them when those happen during your live sessions? Okay, Professor Saltman says they remain quiet. Absolutely. Okay, thank you so much. And how do you address those? If you're talking and you're asking questions or your students are not replying, what do you do? Okay, Dr. Johnson says physical cues, not answering questions. What physical cues, Dr. Johnson? Can you elaborate a little bit on that? Because it's actually very important.
You told us to keep our audio on mute. Now you're asking me to speak.
Well, when it's a thing, you can of course open your mic.
Well, you can. I mean, you can look at somebody and tell when they don't have a clue. The physical expressions and so forth. I mean, we've got it. The hard part is that when we're like presenting something, we can only see like 5 people at a time. But if not, you ask directly the questions. Some of the people, like, do you understand? Can you repeat? Is there something you ask in a general question and you ask more specifically in order to drill down? Because a lot of times it was a point the whole class didn't get. So it's like, okay, we just swung and missed on that one. We didn't connect. If it's an individual one, usually the physical cue, it's more difficult in Zoom, like I said, because again of the limited on it. But like when you're physically in the class, I mean, that's what I noticed when we went back to class, that you really could see them, see all the things more clearly.
Absolutely. I agree with you. That's one of the biggest challenges that I have had when teaching on Zoom is when I have 20 students and I would like to see all of them to see how engaged they are. And it's just, I just see a bunch. So I agree with you that physical cues are very important. And we can actually use also, I'll talk about it a little bit later, about how we can use also physical cues to teach them physical cues to make sure that we can check if they're following the class. So Professor Keskensi says they look at their phones. Absolutely. And we need to try to engage them. Absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing this. So we're going to be talking now is what is checking for understanding? And again, please use the chat box to give me your definition as what is it that what is checking for understanding? We know that it's a formative assessment, but what does that involve? So checking for understanding is basically and simply the instructor, you, the professor in the class, checking if learning is actually happening at the moment, not after the class is over when it's too late. It's actually asking questions and engaging, not only asking questions, but also engaging students in different formative assessment activities that are going to give you data to make sure that students they actually understand what you are explaining. And if they're not, you can actually tailor and change your strategy, if you like, to be able to meet your students' needs. And again, the most important thing about checking for understanding is that it needs to be done at the moment of teaching, not afterwards. Afterwards, it's too late to make any accommodations. So let me just open the chat box. I see a few. Accept for an example, absolutely. Online, using technology, absolutely. We're going to be talking a little bit about that. So it is important to mention that checking for understanding is actually formative assessment. Formative assessment is that assessment, that checkpoint that you built in your class that gives you super rich data to make sure that your students are on track, that they will be able to meet the course outcomes. They will be able to meet actually the session learning outcomes in your live sessions. And there are 10 maxims of formative assessment that I would like to mention very briefly, so we can actually connect that to the importance of checking for understanding. All of them start with that nest, and it has to be faceless. The more anonymous it is better, so students feel safe and comfortable making mistakes without fear of judgment. Then it facilitates learning. So think about these checking points as facilitation of learning. Students should be actively involved in the assessment process, which of course enhances their learning. Formative assessments encourage students to reflect on their understanding and engage in their own learning. Then we have feedback. Feedback is super important, but it has to be constructive feedback to help students improve. You should describe rather than judge. So it should be really helpful and meaningful for students, helping them understand their strengths and areas of improvement. Then we talk about feed forward. And this complements actually feedback by providing students with guidance on how to improve. What can they do? What they can do to improve, to enhance their learning. It helps them take action steps towards better performance in the future. Then we have focus on learning. The primary goal of assessment should be to enhance learning, not only to collect scores, but to enhance learning rather than just assigning grades. That's what I mean. Formative assessment should be minimal graded or ungraded if possible to emphasize learning over scoring. And that's really important. Sometimes we feel like formative assessment cannot be graded. We can grade it, just minimum. So students actually complete the assessment of the checkpoint that you are building, but it should be like minimal grade. So it should also be flexible. Formative assessment should be varied and adaptable to different teaching styles and learning needs. It has to be fast. You have 3 hours, 2 hours of, and 3 hours or sometimes more of live session. So assessment should be conducted soon after instruction to maximize their impact. And it doesn't need to take forever. It has to be really short just to collect rich data that will help you see where your students are at the learning process. It has to be frequent. Regular formative assessments provide continuous monitoring of students' progress. So it's not only once, but many times during your lesson. So that will allow you to provide timely feedback and adjustments in teaching strategies if necessary. It has to be friendly, of course, because we need to create a supportive and not threatening environment to help students, to motivate students to participate. And that will, of course, reduce anxiety. And then, of course, it can be fun. Incorporating elements of fun into assessment can increase student engagement and motivation. Because we all know that when students are learning and they are having fun, learning is enjoyable, students are more likely to participate actively and retain information. Now let's move on to the different types of checking for understanding. I see a few comments here. Professor Saltman says, I tend to follow the tell, show, do review process. I really like it. Yeah, I tell them the process, I show them the how, and I ask them to try out. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Now, let's talk a little bit about the different types of checking for understanding. Again, when I was designing this 30-minute webinar, I thought about incorporating things that were easy to implement. I don't want you to feel overwhelmed because I know that we are all super busy, right? So checking for understanding doesn't really need to take lots of hours to develop and implement. So let's move on and talk a little bit about the types. It can be verbal strategies. For example, students share their responses to their classmates or to the whole class. It can also be written strategies. Say that you ask them to reflect on a question and they write something in a Google Doc so they can share. Or you decide not to share it, it's just for you. So it can also you can also implement checking for understanding written strategies. They can also be demonstration strategies. So students can complete a task, provide and explain an example, as I saw in one of the comments in the chat box, or create a type of a document, a presentation, or any type of learning artifact to demonstrate that they're actually learning, that they have the knowledge and the content, they have mastered the knowledge and the content. Let me open the chat box and see. Absolutely, Dr. Constance. Teachers are constantly assessing students every minute. Absolutely, every minute of the class. That's what it should be. So we have verbal strategies, written strategies, and demonstration strategies. So the question that we all ask, okay, so which one should I use? Well, actually, effective instructors use a combination of all three strategies, considering that our students are super diverse and they have different learning styles, different learning needs. So in order to be effective, we need to make sure that we actually vary the different types of checking for understanding strategies. And it also depends on the level that you're teaching at the moment. Let me say the assessment can be formal or informal. It can be quick or lengthy, absolutely. And this checking for understanding points, checkpoints that you build in the class should not be that long. It all depends on the purpose of it. And that's one of the tips that I want to share with all of you. So I'm going to share a couple of tips before I enter. I discuss the different strategies that I brought for you today. So basically, the first tip that I want to share with you is that you need to really be clear what you're expecting students to know and be able to do by the end of your live session. So you need to have this very clear. So you make sure that those checking points that you are building, that you are designing, are actually helping you see a bigger picture concerning that learning goal. You also need to provide several opportunities for students to demonstrate their progress. So it's not only at the beginning of the class, but it has to be in the middle. It has to be when you feel like, okay, I don't want to move on to the next section of my class till I make sure that my students are following. Let me see the chat box. That's it. Okay, so also, you need to really think about certain questions before deciding what type of checking for understanding strategy you want to use. You really need to think about, okay, what is it that I want my students to remember? Factual knowledge, or I want them to understand instructions, or do I have 3 learning goals for the session? Do I concentrate on the 3 or should I just go for 1? So it all depends on the goal of your session or the answer to these questions. Any questions so far?
Nope, it's a good learning process. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's move on to the next session. But now, before moving on to the teaching ideas, I would like to hear your experience. I'm going to open a Zoom poll, and I wanted to think about what checking for understanding strategies you use the most in your classroom. Because I know I have visited myself hundreds of classes and sessions here at Wascliffe, and I have seen you in action, working with the students and checking for understanding. So I would like to know what checking for understanding strategies you use the most, and why did you find them effective? Because if you're using them, it's because you think they're effective. And now, how do you ensure that all students are engaged and participating when you're checking for understanding, especially those who are not, those students who are more reluctant to speak up? So I'm going to open the poll, and I really hope it works. There you go. Yes, that's the question. I'm going to give you a minute to think about it. What checking for understanding strategies do you use the most? And why did you find them effective? And then how do you make sure that they're all engaged? All students, no matter their learning style, no matter their background, they are engaged.
Are you wanting to have us specifically incorporate the specific aspects of the maxims that you presented earlier?
No, not really. I'm talking about I'm expecting answers from your experience.
Okay.
Okay, 30 seconds. Hmm. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and end the poll so we can have a look at the answers. Sorry for those who did not complete it. So let's have a look at the answers. So I'm gonna have to stop sharing and share my screen so you can see the results. Ask them questions, absolutely. Ask, for example, ask a comment on another student's comment, absolutely. Tend to chunk into and level on of questioning. Okay, Dr. Constant, you're gonna have to elaborate on this in a sec. Thank you so much for sharing. Okay, I asked you agree. If yes, why not? We're gonna talk about it in a sec, Sema. Okay, ask why questions continually throughout the question. Ask, does it make sense? Absolutely. Thank you so much. I like to read from an example, personalize it. I use 3-to-1 reflection strategies at the end of the class. That's an exit ticket. Beautiful. 3 things they have learned, 2 things they can apply in the future, and 1 thing they can immediately apply in the context. Thank you so much for sharing. You are on the right track for sure. Okay. Well, let's continue talking a little bit about the teaching strategies that I brought today. Again, there are many, hundreds. I just brought a couple that I thought, okay, they're easy to implement. Maybe some of you are already doing it in your classes, and then I brought others that they will be available on A. So let's talk a little bit about these teaching strategies. The first one is silent. As Dr. Johnson said, body language is powerful. And so we have to be very aware of that when we are teaching, but also we can use it to make sure that students are on the right track. Something as easy as thumbs up, wave hand, thumbs down when you ask a question. If they understand, they don't need to really, it has to be something very quick. So what you need to do is to pose the question or concept. You ask students to signal their understanding. They need to be really aware. You have to explain the signal, of course. And then you randomly select students to explain their signal. And by random, we just want to make sure that we are accurate. The data that we collect is accurate. You can also, as someone said on the chat box and in the poll, you can also use binary choice questions, something like true and false, agree and disagree. Again, doesn't need to be that long. You just pose a question, you collect students' response. You can use the whiteboard on Zoom for this. You can use the poll, you can use hand signals in app, and then you discuss the responses to address misconceptions. So what's really good about this is that it provides quick feedback. It really engages students, and it's going to give you some clarity in terms of what level students are at in terms of understanding. And if you have students who are online, maybe you can use the chat box or the polls on Zoom. You can also use visuals, graphic organizers, concept maps, work together in groups or individually. You assign a topic for visual representation. It's gonna, you assign exactly what, you don't really need to say like, oh, you're going to create a graphic organizer. You can actually tell them, okay, I want you to create a picture, this concept. I want you to create a mind map or a concept map or a graphic organizer, whatever they feel more comfortable with, and then they present it to the class. So that's going to help enhance understanding. It's going to boost creativity, and of course, it's going to engage students. And the most important thing is just to come back as a whole group and discuss the visuals. And if you're teaching online, then you can use digital tools like Google Slides or Zoom whiteboards. Also, you can present an error or a misconception of the topic that you know those myths or misconceptions that always happen. So you ask students to identify and correct it. And then as a group, you all discuss the corrections and clarified understanding. That's going to help deepen understanding, and it's going to actually enhance critical thinking skills. Again, if you're teaching on Zoom, you can use digital documents. We have Google Suite for this, or any collaborative tool. Let me open the chat box. I see 4 messages here. Please let us have 3 teaching game programs that Westcliff provides for professors. We don't have, that's a good question for program chairs and deans. I'm not aware of any. We do have quite some templates on Acorn for this purpose, but that's a really good question. And I mean, from the Light Center Professional Development Department, we are working on collecting some tools that we can provide faculty, but that's going to be for 2025. Right now, unfortunately, we don't have anything right now from the Light Center, but that's something that you should ask. I think your program chairs and deans have a better answer for this. Okay, so we have a 4th strategy. As you see, something very simple. And there are, of course, there are way out. There's a 5th. Sorry, I'm just seeing all the slides. Apply it. So basically, what you want here is to make sure, that the students, whatever they learned, they're able to transfer that learning outside of the classroom walls. So they transfer learning to new situations. You can assign a task requiring application of a concept. So students can create examples, illustrate concepts, and then they discuss and review the applications. So that way they're able to demonstrate understanding. And of course, they see the relevance of learning whatever they're learning, that they can actually apply it in the real world. And if you're teaching online, of course, you can use online research. You can use the Light Center digital resources and library for this. And you can also use GAP. Now, there are way more classroom ideas. We have think, pair, share, pop quizzes, students asking questions. I'm working with 3 screens, so sorry if you see me going around. Keywords, 3 takeaways, debates, true and false statements, technology, exit tickets. So there's lots. I'm going to share that with you, but we don't have enough time to cover them all today. but I will share all this presentation with you. And again, we have lots of templates and courses on Acorn. So any questions, any suggestions, any other comments before we move on? If not, then we only have 5 minutes to recap. The most important thing about checking for understanding is everyone wins. You as instructor, you win rich data. You get rich data to help you make informed decisions about your teaching. Also, it helps students because while you're monitoring their learning, you can actually adapt your teaching. You can actually support them in the best possible way. Now, what did we do today? Today, we talked a little bit in 30 minutes about what checking for understanding is, the benefits, and we examined 5 ideas for building checkpoints during your live lesson. We have lots of resources on Acorn. 30 minutes is not enough to talk about any topic, any professional development topic, especially when it comes to teaching. It's a beautiful, challenging craft, right? So I'm going to add a link to the catalog on Acorn, where you will find everything that we have designed for you concerning checking for understanding, including a crash course of 15 minutes dealing with strategies, and that it actually contains content from this presentation. Any questions?
Great tips, by the way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Let me continue sharing. We are not done yet. Give me just a couple of minutes, please. I'm going to add to the chat box 3 links. The first one is access to the handout. It's on Acorn. You have to log in on Acorn. There is a handout from this presentation. Then you have also access to the slides that I just used, and the slides also contain more classroom ideas, more than the ones that I covered today. And of course, as we always do before leaving this session, please make sure that you complete the survey. We want to hear from you. Any feedback is welcome. We really want to improve the professional development initiatives that we offer you every month. So we would like to hear from you concerning your experience. And I don't want to leave today's session without inviting you to the 4 sessions that we have next month. In August, we're going to be working in July. Let's start with July. Next week, AI in the classroom. From the Doctoral Writing Center, we're going to be talking about how to use AI in teaching as teaching tool. So that is on July 25th. Then on July the 30th, Joni, who's here with us, the professional development specialist, will be guiding the monthly reading club on Articulate and an app. And we are going to also concentrate on AI and implementing AI in active learning environments. And then last but not least, we are inviting you to join the PLC for August. If you're interested in learning about AI in professional research, innovation, and learning activities, please complete the form that I just posted on the chat box and let us know your intention to join the PLC in August. With that, I think we are ready. So thank you so much for coming today. If you have any questions, if you need anything from the PD department, we are here to help. Just send us an email. You can chat with me on GChat. So we are here to support your teaching journey at Westcliff. So thanks, everyone.